Hello, Pearl. Great, great, great.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Pearl.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm excited to be here this afternoon to share with you a topic which I'm sure we already know so much about already. So like already Prince Bedu already shared, I'm Pearl Salome. I'm currently with St. Elizabeth Catholic Hospital in the Ahafo region. I'm standing in for Mr. Kwejo Anson, now Director of Health Service in one of the districts. So this afternoon, I'm going to be sharing with you something about appropriate ways of introducing complementary foods to children. This is the outline for my presentation. So the period of 6 months to about 2 years is a very important and very critical point of child growth, because that is where most of the growth and developmental milestones of the child happens. And so the way a child is fed around this time is more like a foundation for their future. It determines their fate, whether they are going to be adults who are very intelligent, whether they will even make it through to their 10th birthday, 20th birthday. The pace or the foundation that is set through feeding around this time is what determines how their adulthood will be like. So from 6 months, breast milk alone, as we already know, is no longer sufficient to meet the nutritional needs for the growth of the child. I usually would explain it in this term. It's just like building a house. Once your foundation is set and you start laying your blocks, you need so many other things, raw materials, to get your building going. And so once the breast milk is no longer enough, it's important to start adding on other feeds to meet the nutritional needs for the growing baby. So as healthcare professionals, especially for those of us in the field of nutrition and dietetics, the role we play for children around this time is very critical, because whatever we teach the mothers to do is what is going to determine the fate of these children. And so I believe as healthcare professionals, especially dealing with under 5 children, they are very important. So whatever message we are going to give them must be ones that would improve the nutritional status of these children, especially around this time. I picked this from UNICEF, and it says that globally, 1 out of 3 children under 5 are not growing well due to malnutrition. Almost half do not eat a varied diet. Their diets, they may be eating, but it's not really meeting the dietary diversity score that we know of. And mostly it starts from the 6th month when complementary feeding has been started. The quality of a child's diet is more important before age 2 than any other time of their life, because any nutrient deficiency that occurs that can harm the child's development around this time is very much irreversible, unfortunately. So for example, vitamin A deficiency, that's the main cause of blindness in children. That's when it occurs, cannot be reversed. Iron deficiency, that could also impair mental development, limiting their future learning abilities, cannot also be reversed. So indeed, from the age 6 months to age 2 is a very critical point, critical time for a child that the feeding has to get so much attention. This picture is just basically telling us about the brain development of a child. When you look at it critically, you realize that between age 0 to 2, that's where the brain development really occurs. After this time, every other thing that happens is just like maintaining or adding on to where the brain development has occurred. And so since this time is when majority of a child's brain development is ongoing, whatever the child is fed at this time is what is going to determine whether or not, even when they start schooling, they will be able to understand what they will be taught. So again, nutrition around this time for a baby or a child is very essential. It even determines their social and emotional development around this age. Nearly 80% of a child's brain develops by age 2, and it's fueled by good nutrition. Without good nutrition, this cannot happen as it should. So what then is complementary feeding? I'm wondering, I'm sure people may be wondering, what at all is complementary feeding? Complementary feeding is basically adding on other foods to breast milk. Like we already know, a child should be given breast milk only till the 6th month. And then from the 6th month, since breast milk alone
Hello, Adipel, kindly unmute.
Sorry.
Yeah,
So complementary food is any food, whether commercially manufactured, whether it is homemade or prepared at home. And it's suitable, it's more like any food that is being prepared to add on to what the child is receiving from breast milk or formula milk to meet their nutritional needs is complementary food. When complementary feeding is not done right, whether it is done too early or it is done too late, malnutrition can occur. And in fact, sometimes deaths or mortality can even become a result of this occurrence. This year alone, unfortunately, we've lost about 5 children to malnutrition. And in taking the history, you realize that complementary feeding was started way too early than the time it was supposed to have been started. In some instances too, you find children whose mothers wait till about the 8th month or the 9th month before they start giving complementary foods. And so the timeliness of complementary feeding is very important. It doesn't have to be done late. It doesn't have to be done too early as well. So the optimal age for starting complementary feeding, as like I already said, is the 6th month. The body uses food, as we already know, for energy, to keep it alive, to grow, to fight infections, to move and be active. If a young child is not getting all these nutrients, is not getting enough nutrients from food from the 6th month, their growth will not go as it should be going. Their brain development will be impaired, and it has, like I said earlier on, irreversible consequences on their general health and well-being. Now, there are energy gaps that need to be filled, because by the 6th month, we know the child is still breastfeeding, but because breast milk will not be able to fill up the gap for the energy and for the other nutrients that the child requires for their growth, that is why complementary feeding is being used to fill up this gap. So for most babies, it is appropriate or is ideal to start the complementary feeding at the 6th month. You'll find out from the various stages, from 6th month to the 9th month through to age 1, how much, because a lot of times when the caregivers come to us, the question is about so those are some of the comments that the mothers bring. But sometimes when you probe further and you do your assessment, you realize that they are actually overfeeding the child or underfeeding. So please, when you look at this graph, bar chart or graph image critically, you realize that for all the various nutrients, there is still a gap that needs to be filled for every child. There's an energy gap that needs to be filled. Even though breast milk will be providing some of the nutrients, there's still a gap that needs to be filled. When you look at protein as well, about 50% gap needs to still be filled. As for iron, you have over 80% of iron needs that needs to be filled, as well as vitamin A. These are all very essential nutrients that the child requires for their growth in that duration of their life. There are some developmental milestones that you see in the child to determine whether or not they are ready to start the complementary feeding. We know that by the 6th month, their ability to even hold their neck straight is better, and they are able to start holding on to objects. Sometimes they even pick up objects and then they take it to their mouth. They are able to chew a bit, mash onto things a bit. They are able to, their tooth even starts erupting gradually. You find some of the babies who may have 2 teeth down, 2 at the top, or maybe 1. And so all these changes will let you know that the child is actually ready to start the complementary feeding. Now, there are some guiding principles for complementary feeding. Like I said, it has to be done appropriately. And so the question about how much will be enough, that is the amount. How many times should the child be fed? That's the frequency. What kind of nutrients should be in the food? That's variety. And how should the food be presented? The consistency. Should it be watery? Should it be very thick? Should it be blended? Or should it be chopped? So the age of the child will determine how the consistency should go like. Additionally, it should be prepared under a very safe and a hygienic way, because if every nutrient that the child needs is in that food and is not prepared under hygienic conditions, you may find infection or toxins ending up in the food, which will not make it safe for the child. So it always has to be prepared under hygienic conditions. And then the food should be served with a lot of patience and love. That is one thing that's most of the time we find the mothers lacking a bit. Even though they will spend money, cook the food, prepare the food, but the patience, feeding a child for over an hour or 30 minutes for her to finish everything is what sometimes they don't have, especially for the working class mother. She's in a hurry to go to work or she's selling in the market. She has prepared the food, all right, is in her bag, but the patience to feed the child to get the adequate amount is sometimes what is lacking. So we are going to gradually understand how all these gaps can be filled. This is just a summary of what I just said. So it has to be done in a timely way. It has to be adequate to meet the child's nutritional needs. It has to be safe. The utensils that are being used, the spoon, the bowl in which the child's feed will be placed in has to be clean and sterilized well. So, and the child has to be properly fed. Sometimes caregivers assume that when a child cries, it means they want food. They can't talk, and so their only way of communicating to adults is to cry. But every cry is assumed that they want food. So sometimes they end up being overly fed. And you know, even for an adult, when you are overly fed, it's uncomfortable. So you see sometimes the children will be crying and then they'll vomit everything out just because they've been overfed. They are being treated like miniature adults. Their stomach size is so small. But then parents will still give so much food because they feel, oh, soon. And I said, the child is crying, so let me just feed so that they will sleep off. Complementary feeding has to be appropriately done. So at age 6, complementary feeding has to be started with small amounts of food, and then the quantity gradually increase as the age increases, and still maintain breastfeeding frequency. It doesn't mean that once you start complementary feeding, then breastfeeding should stop. Breastfeeding should still be ongoing while the complementary feeding is done, because mind you, breast milk is providing some nutrients. The complementary foods is also just going to add on to what the child is already getting from their breast milk. So you increase the food consistency and then variety with age. So at the 6th month, it's best you start with the liquid foods and then gradually you change to the semi-solid and the solid food. So the semi-solid food, like porridges, not so watery, it should be a bit thick. At the 8th to the 9th month, finger foods can be introduced to the child because by that time they're able to hold on very well to things, and they may have a lot more tooth in their mouth to be able to chew onto whatever you are giving them. At the 12th month, because the child is more familiar with their environment, you can start introducing the family food, because sometimes if the caregiver is eating or the parents are eating, you see the child struggling, putting their hand in the food, trying to pick some to eat. So around that time, the family foods can be introduced. So at the 6th month, the amount of food that should be given exactly at 6th month should be around 2 to 3 tablespoons. 2 to 3 tablespoons. That's just about 30 mils or 40 mils of porridge. Someone may be wondering, why isn't that too small for the baby? Yes, because the stomach size at that age is very small. The child doesn't need a big cup of porridge or a big bowl of porridge. A lot of times you see mothers picking sometimes the cover of a flask They'll pour the porridge about halfway and expect the baby to finish everything. To some extent, they'll even hold the nose of the child or ask another caregiver to hold the baby's hand to the back, and then they'll force everything down the throat of the baby. And most of the time, they'll end up pouring out or vomiting out everything. It's just because their stomach size at that age is still very small.
Sorry, Pearl, please kindly go on.
Okay. So responsive feeding should be done still at this age. So continue breastfeeding on demand, both day and night, not just during the day, but also in the night. You interact with the baby by washing their hands. Hand washing shouldn't just be done for the older children, the babies as well, because they pick up things from the floor. They are putting their hands in their mouth all the time, especially when their tooth starts erupting. The gum feels a bit itchy, so they pick up things like their toys, etc., and put it in their mouth. And so it's important to still wash the hands of the baby. Sit the baby down on your lap, which I'll show images of how it should be done. And then the baby shouldn't be forced to eat. Force feeding is a no, especially when complementary feeding is being started. Once the caregiver starts forcing the child, it makes the child forms a very negative image with feeding. And so for such children, every time you pick up a bowl or their cup and they see you coming, they start crying because they know you are going to force them again to eat. Eating time should be a fun time. It should be a time for caregiver and baby to form more bonding. And so this is not the time to hold the nose of the baby to force down the food into their throat. So as the baby grows older, the texture and the quantity and the frequency and thickness can be increased, as well as variety. When the complementary feeding is being started at the 6th month, a lot of times caregivers are in a hurry to make the baby try so many things at the same time. They end up making cereal mixes for them and combining so many proteins at the same time. When that happens, it becomes difficult to even identify which foods the child may be allergic to. So it's better you start, especially for the proteins, 1 or 2 at a time. You try for 2 or 3 days before it is changed into other foods. So for the children between 6 to 9 months, you can feed 2 to 3 meals in a day with 1 or 2 additional snacks in a day. With the snacks also, we encourage fruits especially, or vegetables as snacks, instead of the sweetened beverages, which may just be loaded with calories and less nutrients. Whatever snack the child may be getting should be contributing to their nutrient needs for the day. And so it should be nutrient dense. So like I said earlier on, you start with 2 to 3 tablespoons mashed food or cooked porridges, cereal. And the porridges can be enriched with so many other things like garnet paste or peanut butter can be added to the porridge, or an egg can be blended with the cereal. So for example, if the caregiver is preparing oats porridge, she can blend the egg with the oats before preparing it on fire, but not to give raw egg to the child. In some instances, when you are trying to even make the child increase in weight, things like vegetable oil could be added to the porridge of the child just to increase the calories in the porridge. Any food can be given to children after 6 months as long as it is mashed or chopped. Because they don't have to in their mouth yet, especially at the 6th month, the proteins have to be blended. So for example, if you want to give chicken or beef or steak in the child's food, at 6 months, she doesn't have any tooth in their mouth. Sometimes I intentionally will ask the mothers, also ma ban and nam libya and now we are nam the man, and then she'll tell you, I just chew it and then I put it in the child's mouth. That shouldn't be done. The protein can be blended, it can be steamed and then blended into fine paste and used to prepare the child's food. So this picture is just showing us how the 6 to the 9-month-old baby should be fed. You can see that breastfeeding is still ongoing. The child's hands are being washed. The caregiver is also washing their hands. And then you have all the various food groups here. And the porridge shouldn't be too light. It should be a bit thick with an additional snack, 1 or 2 snacks to the main meals of the child. So from 9 to 12 months old, breastfeeding should still be continued, plus 3 to 4 meals. 1 to 2 snacks can be added or offered within the day to the child. The number of snacks to be added to the child's meals also is determined by how much the child is weighing. So for example, if it is an underweight child whose weight you are trying to improve, then you could do more than the 1 or 2 snacks in addition to their meal, because you want them to catch up to their ideal nutritional status or their ideal weight. So finally, chopped meals can be given, mashed food, finger foods for the 9 to 12 months old, because at that age they are more matured. They have a lot more tooth in their mouth so they can chew. The amount of food to be given can be increased to about half a cup, like half cup of 250 mils. And in demonstrating it to the mother, if you just mention 250 mils cup, sometimes it gets confusing for them. So as a professional, you can have cups or bowls this size in your office so that you can show to the mother, especially the cups and bowls that are very familiar to them in the market. You can get a few on your table in your office and then show it to the mother for her to appreciate the amount you are talking about. Animal source foods are also very important, or proteins are very important at this stage because growth is still ongoing. And so it should be added to their meals in a way or consistency that they can easily tolerate and not get choked on. So for example, you can add soft salmon or tuna to the child's meal, or cooked egg. For some instances, you could also give scrambled egg or fried egg to the child. Milk should still also be a part of their meal. So for example, if the mother wants to make a blended fruit for the child, she can make a milkshake with the infant milk and blend it with the fruits for the child to take. Those who are less than 12 months old are still supposed to be taking infant milk, not adult milk. Sometimes you find some of the mothers giving non-dairy milk to a less than 12 months old baby. Or sometimes, I don't want to mention brands, but they end up giving the adult milk to the child. Make sure you ask questions about the type of milk the mother is offering to the child, because the type of milk is to be given is determined by the age of the child. So this is just a picture showing how a child who is 9 to 12 months old should be fed. Just like the one I showed for the 6 to the 9-month-old baby. Breastfeeding should still be ongoing. Hands should be washed all the time for both caregiver and the child. And 2 snacks can be offered within a day. But like I said earlier on, the number of snacks to be offered as you assess the child, as you watch how much they are weighing, because we don't also want to get an obese baby. So if you feel the child is getting too overweight, then you may want to monitor how many snacks or what kind of snacks the child is being given. For the child who is 12 to 24 months old, 3 to 4 meals can be offered, mostly the family meals, and about 1 to about 3/4 to 1 cup of a bowl of feed can be given. Food prepared should still be done under a very hygienic condition to avoid diarrhea and other illnesses, and should be stored in room temperature and used within 2 hours after preparation. So once complementary feeding is started, like I said earlier on, variety should be given. The food shouldn't be one way. Sometimes you find some of the mothers, because they are busy, they will prepare one big flask of cocoa for 2 days, and the same thing is being given the child the whole time. And I ask them, so if you are sick and you are being visited in the hospital and they are giving you the same food throughout your 1 week stay, would you be happy? And they'll just laugh. So variety is very important. It's important the mother offers different food groups for the baby, because the different food groups are offering different nutrients for different purposes. And so the animal source food from in 1-star shouldn't be left out. So, or if you are going to use the 4-star diet to guide the mother, all the 4 stars in the food groups should feature at least every day in the child's meals. With the carbohydrates or staples, when it comes to things like maize or sweet potatoes, you can encourage the mother to go for the yellow corn, because that has more vitamin A, or the orange flesh potatoes, instead of just the regular white one, just to increase the intake of micronutrients of the child in a day. So legumes like beans, agushi, the seeds, granules, which forms 1-star, and the vitamin A rich foods like the dark green vegetables, alefu, ayoyo, bokoboko, kontomire, carrots, pumpkin, bananas, watermelon. All these vegetables and fruits should be given to the child. It should be made in such a way that for that age of the child they can tolerate. A 7-month-old or an 8-month-old baby can still have jollof. You just need to blend it with the chicken or fish into a texture that the child can easily accommodate. And healthy fats should be used in preparing the child's meal. We shouldn't say that because it's just a child, anything goes. It should be a healthy option for them. There's a table just showing us the ages, the various ages, and the texture of the meals and their frequency that should be given, and as well as the amount that the child should be receiving. So when you look at, for example, from age 9 to 11 months, you are saying that you can give finely chopped or mashed foods that the baby can pick. Breastfeeding should always still be added to the meals. And depending on the child's appetite, 1 to 2 snacks can be offered or more, depending on what you want to achieve for the child. And the amount of food to be given is about half of the 250 ml bowl or cup. This picture is also depicting what I just talked about. So at age 6 months, the child should receive 2 to 3 meals. the amount per meal is 2 to 3 tablespoons. And the texture should be thick with breast milk added. From 6 to 9 months, you offer 2 to 3 meals plus breastfeeds, 1 to 2 snacks, and that you give about still 2 to 3 tablespoons and increase gradually depending on the child's appetite. The meals should be given can be mashed or pureed family foods. From 9 to 12 months, you give 3 to 4 meals plus breast milk. The quantity should be about half a cup of 250 ml bowl or cup, and the kind of texture should be finely chopped, finger foods or sliced foods. So for example, a 9-month-old baby can be given banana to a finger of banana. You just wash the child's hand very well, and then you give the finger of banana. And all these things should still be added on with breast milk, the variety. So the carbohydrate foods, the fruits and vegetables, the animal sources, the legumes, all in addition. And sometimes you can have the mother get some Cocoa Plus just in case she feels like the child is not getting enough of the nutrients that have been mentioned, just as a supplement to add on for the child. And the meal should be prepared in a very hygienic way. Sometimes some of the mothers will assume, oh, every time she uses the washroom, hands should be washed with soap and water, not just the water, but with soap. A lot of times they'll just change the child's diaper, and then the next moment they are breastfeeding or they are feeding the child. Let's emphasize on the need to prepare these meals we have mentioned in a very hygienic manner. So like I said, practice good hygiene and proper food handling by washing hands. The caregiver should wash her hands as well as washing the child's hand before preparing the food and before eating. Food should be stored safely, especially after it's been prepared and not everything was eaten. It should be stored safely to avoid food poisoning. Utensils that are being used to serve and prepare the food should always be kept clean. Sometimes the child's bowl or cup is left in the main storage container for the adults things. And sometimes you find dust and other things, other rodents all around. It will be better for the mother to get a separate container, preferably with a cover, and keep the child's feeding items into it, where every morning she washes them and then sterilizes them in hot water before using them again. Feeding bottles should be avoided as much as possible because they are very difficult to keep clean. And one of the disadvantages of the feeding bottles from the 6th month is that if a child is being introduced to feeding bottles, going along the way, every time they expect their food to be in a feeding bottle. So even if you want to feed her TZ, she expects it to be in a bottle because that is what she is used to. So it's better the child is fed with a cup or with a spoon. Even from the 4th month, if the mother is expressing milk, it's advised that she can start using a spoon to fetch the breast milk that she has expressed for the child, so that gradually the child becomes familiar with what a spoon is, so that by the time she is 6 and you are giving her porridge with a spoon, she wouldn't reject it. So unhygienic feeding practices can lead to diarrhea, compromising the nutritional status of the child. Yeah. So clean water and clean raw materials should be used in the food preparation. I think I've mentioned all of this earlier on. The child should be fed with a lot of patience and love. That is what we call responsive feeding. Sometimes, especially the very busy mothers, she will just prepare the feed, try to feed the child 5 or 10 minutes. If it's not forthcoming, she'll just leave it for maybe an elderly sibling of the child to continue. And sometimes these elderly siblings, because they are not getting what you are giving the baby, they'll end up eating the food. You come and get feedback from them. But did you give your brother her food? She said, oh, mommy, she ate everything. Meanwhile, she has finished the food. And so the feeding should be done by the mother in a very patient way with a lot of love. So like you can see in this picture, the mother is feeding her baby and smiling. She's playing with the baby whilst feeding. So sometimes the mother can sing for the baby, clap for the baby, do everything you can. Because I always say that if the child becomes malnourished and you are coming on admission, you are looking at spending over a week or more on admission just for your baby to get better. So if you need to spend 30 minutes or 40 minutes for the child to eat something appropriate for their growth, that sacrifice have to be made to avoid being admitted for malnutrition to be managed. So even the fathers can also support the feeding, because sometimes some of the children form a very good rapport with their fathers. And so when they are feeding them, they even end up eating the food better than their mothers will do. So let's encourage the fathers to also be involved in the feeding as well. So you feed the child directly and assist older children to feed themselves. And then also being sensitive to their hunger and satiety clues is very important. Like I said, I mentioned earlier on, sometimes some of the children are overfed. As soon as the child cries, they pick up food. It's like food has become like a rewarding thing for babies. As soon as they cry, breast milk is pulled out or a bottle of porridge is pulled out. Maybe the child is just sleeping, wants to sleep. Maybe the diaper is wet, but they will rather feed and they get overfed. So it's important for the caregivers to pay attention to hunger clues that the child may give, or satiety. When they are full, what signs they show. When they are hungry, what signs they show. The mother should learn about these things about the child and pick up them and address them accordingly when the need comes. Feed slowly and patiently and encourage the child to eat, but not forcing them. You know, for those that are a bit older and who can understand words, you can start singing to them about the food and the various food nutrients and what they can do. If it means even relating it with their favorite cartoons, if you eat your cup of porridge, you end up strong like your favorite cartoon. Stuff like that would encourage the child to eat, but not to force feed them. Because once you start force feeding, a child will form a very negative relationship with food. And every time they see you with their food coming, they'll start crying. If they refuse a particular food that you offered, it is better to keep experimenting and changing it. I always tell the mothers that feeding a child, starting with complementary feeding, is just like an adult learning a new food. I remember when I had to learn how to eat T-zers, I struggled for a while before I finally accepted it, but now it's one of my favorite foods. So teaching a child something new, don't expect that in 1 week or 1 day the child will know it. It's just like teaching them ABCD. Some will take 3 months to learn it. Some will take 6 months. Some will take just a week. So it needs a lot of patience and love for them to get it right. as much as possible, you try to minimize distractions during meal times. Because if the child is watching their favorite cartoon and you are trying to feed, some of them, all their attention will be on the cartoon. And so she will see the feeding as a distraction for them and will easily lose interest in the food they are offering. And so distractions should be minimized. But then you have to also learn the child and what works best for them. For some children, if they are eating and you show them their favorite cartoon, that is when they even eat more or finish everything for you. So the mother has to pay attention to what works best for the baby and then go by that. Remember also that feeding times are periods where you share, love, and learn. So you talk to the child, make eye contact whilst feeding them. You talk to them about what is in the food. This food I'm giving you is going to make your brain grow bigger and wider and better. Stuff like that, positive words, positive affirmations, telling the child these positive things can also encourage them to eat their food. There are certain things that should also be avoided in a baby's food. So for example, tea and coffee should be entirely avoided in giving them their food. It shouldn't be mixed with their food because they interfere sometimes. Some of these types of teas and coffee interfere with iron absorption. Carbonated drinks and beverages. Last time I was on the bus with a mother with, I think the baby is around 8 months old, and she was giving one of these sweetened beverages, the carbonated ones in a can. All these things have very less nutritional value. They are just full of calories and sugar. And so as much as possible, they should be avoided in feeding babies with. The sugary drinks and the high concentrated fruit juices, preferably, they should be rather the naturally made juice, the homemade juice made with natural fruits at home. And when these sugary beverages are given before the real feeding times, they end up being full already before the real food comes, which may be loaded with nutrients. And so they'll end up rejecting the main food that we may have to offer. Nuts should also be watched because they can cause choking, especially if the child doesn't have enough to chew them very well. So these are a few examples of pictures of some of the things that should be avoided. Alcohol obviously should be avoided in the baby's food. And then too much sodium. Too much sodium because it should be avoided also because the baby's kidneys are still very little and still maturing. And so even in preparing their porridges and other meals, artificial spices and too much salt should be avoided. Some mothers buy soda biscuits, etc. for the babies. They are very high in some trans fat, some sodium, so they should be avoided in the baby's food. The artificial juices are also having little or no nutritional value, and so should also be avoided. Yeast or pasteurized yogurts are very hard for them to digest, so those things as well should be avoided for them. There are a few foods that could also cause choking for the child, like berries, small candies, raw carrots, whole kernel corn, grapes and raisins, nuts and peanuts, popcorn. Some of these things can cause choking for babies, and so should be watched, should be avoided for them. The stomach size of a baby at 6 months is around 200 mils. And that is why it's very important the quantity and the consistency of the feed being given is watched, is paid attention to. When the mother comes and she's telling you about how the child doesn't eat anything, You ask her about the quantity. A lot of times you realize that they are trying to overfeed the child, and it's not supposed to be so. That is why the child is rejecting the food. It should be age appropriate. The quantity that is being offered has to be age appropriate. So the amount of food that the child should take should just be about their first size. For example, a 12-month-old baby or a 9-month-old baby who you want to offer banku, the banku or the omutu shouldn't be as the size of what an older child will take or a toddler will take. It should be very small, and their fist is usually very small. So probably the mother can sometimes use the fist of the child to gauge how much they are offering, aside the quantities we have mentioned earlier on. Talked about this already. For the 12-month-old and above, mashed kenke can be given, rice porridge, mini mix. Vegetables can be added to their food, mashed yam, rice, biscuits. Egg preparations like scrambled eggs can be given to them, because at that age they can take the family food, what is being prepared for the whole family, but then reducing the amount of spices and salt that we added. So feeding techniques that can be used in feeding babies include being sensitive, like I mentioned earlier on, being sensitive to their hunger and satiety clues, feeding patiently and not force feeding, trying other foods if you try one and she's not taking it. For example, if banku with okra is offered and the child is refusing, banku with granule soup or banku with okra can be offered. The good thing about babies is that at the 6th month, they don't have any idea what the different tastes are. You are now going to teach them the different types of taste. So sour taste, bitter taste, sweet taste, metallic taste. So if the child is only being introduced to only sweet taste, they will become used to only sweet things. So the different types of taste and textures should gradually be introduced to the child for them to be able to learn the different types of taste that we have. Other attributes of complementary foods include the right consistency. It shouldn't be too thin, it shouldn't be too thick, just right. When it is on the spoon, it should drop gradually and not fall off the spoon. It should be soft, it should be easy to digest, inexpensive, locally available, culturally accepted, and easily prepared at home. Inexpensive and locally available ones should be considered, because if you introduce the child to something that is some bottle feed that is very expensive and you can't find it in your area, or she doesn't have money to go and get it, and that's the only thing that the child will take, then it becomes problematic. So it's important for the mother to start introducing the child to locally available homemade food that she has prepared herself. If she's preparing it herself, she knows what she's adding on to the meal to make it nutritionally adequate. Feeding during and after illnesses. Feeding a child who is ill. Breastfeeding can still continue if it is a child who is breastfeeding. You encourage the child to eat and drink with a lot of patience. In fact, a double dose of the patience you give when she was not sick. Now that the child is sick, a double dose of patience should be used in feeding them. And the feeding should be given small amounts at a time, because even for us adults, when we are sick, when you are an adult and you have malaria, your appetite will sometimes drop. And it's similar sometimes for babies as well. So the feeding frequency should be done small at a
Yes.
time,
I'll
and
start.
ask the child if it's in case it's a child who can
remember
talk.
the woman's.
You can ask which foods they prefer and offer those ones most, and give a variety of nutrient-rich foods. Continue breastfeeding as well. During recovery also, you can feed an extra meal to the recommended meal for their age. Give an extra amount, give extra rich foods, give extra patience, and give extra breastfeeds as often as the child wants, because they are sick and they are now recovering. Their intake may not be as much. And so you increase the quantity for them and offering variety of nutrient-rich foods with a lot of patience. Now we come to a fuzzy eater. Fuzzy eaters, or a fuzzy eater, or a fuzzy eater child is ones who are very unwilling to try any new food. They will just not try. Once you bring the food closer, they'll just start screaming, and it's like they have a negative relationship with food. Most of the time they'll throw tantrums when the food is brought closer to them. They are very picky in the kind of foods they want to eat. Some of them are also very particular about one particular food. Is that food or nothing else? Those are fuzzy eaters. And how would you handle a fuzzy eater? Because at the end of the day, we want this child to also still be nutritionally, have a good nutritional status and getting all the required nutrients for their age. So how would you handle such a child? So in feeding a fuzzy child, first of all, you have to feed them the same food as they are feeding the rest of the family, so that they don't feel too different. So that it doesn't feel like, oh, as for Kwesi, he doesn't eat, so we are making his own different for him. When that is done continuously, they don't feel belonging. They feel like they have been more like separated from the family. So it's important to still include them in what the rest of the family is eating. You just encourage the child that, okay, if it is a family that eats at the same table, you just make them aware that, you see, everybody on the table now is eating the same thing. And we all want to grow well. So you offer them the same food as you are offering the family, but then with less salt, not adding too much salt like what you would have added to the adult meal in that particular food. The best way children learn is by copying us. So if you are telling the child to eat fruits, and you, the parents, you eat your fruits once in a month, you don't expect the child to also eat the fruit when you offer the child. So try these things that you are offering them with them. Let them see you also eating it. As you are offering it to them, let them also see that you are also eating the food. And if they are able to finish even a small portion of their food, it's important to praise and encourage them. Even if it's a little, they were able to take. Just keep encouraging them. Make them feel like they are on top of their game. If they are able to achieve something. It is very frustrating if you have a child who is a fuzzy eater, because sometimes you try everything, but then you still need a lot of patience, and if possible, feed them the nutrient-dense food. If it's a small portion, they are able to finish. Once it is nutrient-dense and it's a small portion, you offer a little at a time, a little at a time, and you have to keep trying. You have to keep trying and exploring different recipes that can work. Don't say that, the caregiver shouldn't say that, oh, I offered this, the child didn't like it, the child didn't take it, so that's it. You still have to keep trying and trying and trying until you identify what works best for this child. Some of the children are slow eaters, so you may need to be a bit patient with them. And don't give too many snacks in between meals before the main meal is given. If that happens, they may be too full to take the healthy meal you want to offer. And so before you offer the main meal, make sure that you are not giving too many snacks at a time. And don't use food as a reward. Your child may start thinking that the other healthy foods, like the fruits and vegetables, are not good for them. So don't use food as a result and as a reward for them. Make mealtime very enjoyable and fun. Sit with them, chat with them about things, interesting things that they like. Bring them up in the discussion whilst you feed them. Once we are talking to them and having a chat and showing them interesting things that they may like, that can encourage them to also eat. Some of them would want to hold a spoon before they eat what you are offering them. You can wash their own spoon, small spoon for them, have them hold it whilst you try to feed them, like what we see in the picture. You see in the first picture, the child's father also had something on his table as he's eating. He has very good eye contact with the baby and has given her fork to feed herself. So as much as possible, a lot of patience has to be given to a fuzzy eater. And then feed variety of foods at each meal, as we have already mentioned. So, characteristics of food or proper complementary foods is that it should be rich in energy and micronutrients. It should be rich in nutrients, especially iron, zinc, calcium, vitamin A, almost all the macronutrients that we know should be in the complementary food that is being offered. It should be free of contamination, pathogens, harmful chemicals, and it should have as much as possible less spices and less salt. Easy to eat, easily to be accepted by the infant, and it should be in the appropriate amount for their age. If it is a 6-month-old baby, you don't offer a 250 ml cup of porridge. Theirs is to start with 2 to 3 tablespoons and gradually increase. So it should be age appropriate amount that is being offered. It should be easy to be prepared from the family foods, and the cost should be acceptable by most of the family. Because sometimes the arguments or the issues around the child's feeding comes up if it is too expensive for the father to afford. So whatever options that the caregiver is going for, cost should be considered. Is it something that can be sustained? Is it something that can be easily found in the area where they are? If it is not, then it will be very difficult to sustain whatever that they've chosen. So it should be something that is locally available and cheap, less expensive. A few key messages about complementary feeding are that complementary feeding should begin soon after completing 6 months of age and continued with breastfeeding. Complementary foods should be at the right consistency, energy dense, and a variety of all nutrients for the demand of the child's growth at that age be included. Children or the child should be fed patiently and given adequate time and attention. Foods should be prepared and stored hygienically for children. Continue feeding during illnesses and even increase during the convalescence stage. In summary, The nutrient requirements for children increase after 6 months as they grow. It is therefore very important to take into cognizance the following when deciding on complementary feeding: the age of the child, the frequency of feeding, the amount, the variety, the consistency or texture, responsive feeding, and hygiene. These are my references. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adipe Salome. This is an insightful and very, very, very down-to-earth presentation. I think those of us who have been who are not been managing children for some time now, if we get a client tomorrow from a caregiver or a mother, I think we can do a good job at them. God, thank you so much. God richly bless you. I have a few questions here. Yeah, some great comments for you from R.D. Collins, Wise Lecha, and Candy. They are all saying that the presentation was excellent, great. So some people are asking whether we will share the slides. Yes, the slides will be shared. The slides will be shared. So don't worry. There are some questions here, Adi. So please be on standby so you can help us address.
Yes, please.
So you talked about the milk that should be age appropriate, milk intake, and the type of milk that could be taken.
Yes, please.
So someone, Derry, is asking, could you please throw more light on what types of milk to be given to a child according to their age?
Okay, please. So we have adult milk and infant milk. The adult milk is what we give from age, at least age 2. So something like ideal milk can be considered as adult milk. Infant formula, I don't want to mention brands, but well, milk like Lactogen, Similac, NAN, Aptamil are all considered as infant milk. The type that you give, whether Lactogen 1 or Lactogen 2 or NAN 1, is determined by the age. So if you see 1 on the container, it means that it has to be given to a baby who is less than 6 months. From 6 months, you see the written on the tin 2. So maybe NAN 2, Lactogen 2, SMA 2. So between ages 6 months to 12 months, that is for that age category. However, those who are above 1, so say from 1 to 3 years, there's neither 1 plus. And from that age also, you can give the cowbell and the peak options, ideal milk options as well. But most importantly, milk like non-dairy milk should not be given to children. They are not meant for children. A lot of times we see that happening, and most of these children come malnourished. Ideal non-dairy milk is not meant for children. The nutrient in there is not appropriate for the child system even.
Okay, so as a follow-up to that, do children after 6 months or at 6 months, do they require milk? Is milk a requirement?
Yes, please. They still need milk. If it's a child who is not breastfeeding, the child will need milk, like milk from others, not the breast milk, so infant milk. So milk definitely has to be a part of, if it is, there's a whole way of feeding a non-breastfed child. Because of time, that couldn't be included, but there's a way of feeding a child who is not breastfed.
Okay.
So milk has to be part of.
Okay, so for those who are breastfeeding, the breast milk will be okay, or they should also take some milk?
For those who are breastfeeding, if you assess the child and the child's growth is not meeting their age, like their weight for their age is still very low, then you may want to add additional milk apart from the breast milk. So for example, depending on the age, if it's 6 months, you could have the mother give about 100 mils or 120 mils of the prepared milk to the child per feed. But if it's a child who is actively breastfeeding, then you may not need to add too much of the additional milk. If not, the child may end up gaining too much weight, and then you have an obese baby. That is something we are battling right now. We are not done fighting undernutrition. And overnutrition is all over the place nowadays. So per your assessment as a professional, we know the tools we use for assessment. You take the weight for age of the child. The charts are there, the WHO charts for weight for age is there. If you do your assessment and you realize that this child is way below the median, then you can recommend additional milk and additional feeding items to the baby's feed.
Okay. So Derry asked another question. There seemed to be a little confusion about what time to start complementary feeding. Should it be started within the 6th month or after the 6th month?
Okay, thank you very much. So when we say a child has turned 6 months, let's do this calculation. If the child was born on 1st January, on the 1st of June, that child is 6 months. Okay. So on the 1st of June, complementary feeding can be started.
Okay.
So after completed months, when you are taking them for the child welfare clinic, they weigh them after every completed month. Okay. That is on the birthday of the child. So if the child was born on the 5th of January, we expect that 5th of June will be her 6th month. So feeding can be started when that completed month has been achieved.
Okay, thank you so much. So, Pearl, hanging on your recommendation of low sodium for babies 6 months and above, yes. R.D. Collins is asking whether you could throw more light, or what would be your recommendation for mothers who give meals from the food vendors, morning, afternoon, evening. They buy food from outside vendors to feed their children. How can we help such mothers?
So as much as possible, let's encourage the mother to prepare the feed homemade feed, because this feed that are being bought, the cube, the artificial spices, she doesn't have control over those things. And the child's renal system is still very immature to handle all of those things. So as much as possible, no matter how busy she is, it doesn't compare to losing your child's kidney. So please, let's encourage the mothers to rather prepare the feed, especially for the younger ones, the infants. She should try as much as possible. It doesn't take 2 hours to make a baby's meal. So no matter how busy she is, it all boils down to planning her week, using the weekend to prepare some of the things. If she has a freezer, she can freeze some of the things so that it's much more easier for her to handle. Because as for the foods that are being bought outside, even for us adults, people are having issues that you are battling with. Recently, we had a teenager who came in with nephrotic syndrome, and then later he is getting an acute kidney injury. And so please, let's encourage the mothers to prepare homemade foods. It's even cheaper.
Okay. So on this, I'll add a little to it that our dietitians and nutritionists, please, we can also set up small catering units in our localities to meet the needs of such people. If you see that you do an assessment and realize that many people in your area really are buying food from vendors, and regardless of your encouragement, they are still buying, then please cook the healthy ones so that they can have a healthy option also for the children. This one will also be another opportunity for us as food service managers, right? So that one can also help. Let's try to meet the needs of the people at every point in time. Thank you, Pearl. Pearl, you have a lot of questions to answer. Okay. Yeah, so as is it Renee, RD Renee or Pario2 is asking for fuzzy eaters who eat very limited foods, let's say only 2 staples, should what they are eating be a concern if they fall within a healthy weight and height per their age? Very, very important question. So can I repeat it? So for fuzzy eaters who eat very limited foods, let's say only 2 staples, so they eat only rice or maize foods, should what they are eating be a concern if they fall within a healthy weight and height per their age? Pearl.
Okay. So if per the assessment, not the mother's assessment, the mother will come and tell you, oh, me banner then weight na ye, or netintin na ye. It has to be based on your assessment using your tools. So if you assess and everything is okay, if the staples are one way, it is the micronutrients that sometimes we are concerned about, and that is what is sometimes hidden. Those deficiencies are sometimes hidden. They don't come out clearly for you to see. So if per your assessment, you feel just the 2 staples, she is doing well on that, then you just encourage the micronutrients intake from the fruits and the vegetables so that she doesn't end up having those deficiencies. But I would also encourage that the mother gets creative. I've had to deal with a very bad fuzzy eater. Parents came and they were insisting, as for our watch, she doesn't take everything. I was like, okay, then let's see what she eats at school. Apparently in school, she eats everything. It is just at home that she wasn't eating much. So sometimes you want to probe further before you make judgments and conclusions. Some of the children, they act up when they are at home and they have a different behavior when they are in school. When their teachers tell them to eat something, they'll eat everything. When they come home and their mothers tell them to eat it, is another story. So you want to probe and probe further. We want as much as possible whatever the child is getting is adequate nutritionally to meet their growing needs.
Great. Thank you so much, Pearl. Venice is asking whether yogurt can be incorporated into infant diet at 6 months or should be done after 6 months. That's infant yogurt like Pascal and other Greek yogurts.
Preferably, it should be done after 6 months. It should be done after 6 months because at the 6th month, the digestive system is now still maturing. So, I mean, it can be done after maybe from the 8th month going, because we encourage the intake of probiotics and prebiotics as well. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So since it's complementary, we should be encouraging that they should breastfeed. Some people just want to stop breastfeeding after 6 months. They should give them milk, then the yogurt can continue. All right. Derry, yes, we have read your recommendation. You said we should try as much as possible to avoid using white people's picture as illustration to illiterate caregivers. From experience, the moment they see such pictures, they conclude whatever is shown there is only applicable to white people. All right, thank you very much. Recommendations well taken.
Well noted. Thank you.
Yes. And Alex is asking, is it wrong to avoid meat and use only legumes or beans or any vegetarian meat in the preparation of complementary feeds? And he said he's asking because of an increased rate of disease in flesh diet in these modern times.
So for children, they are still growing and they need these nutrients in abundance. It is for us adults that at a certain age, we don't need so much of certain nutrients. So I don't think it's fair for a mother to automatically make their child a vegetarian, because vegetarians, we know, they get to lack some nutrients like B12, etc. So if the child is naturally not a vegetarian, it shouldn't be forced on them. Whatever is being given should just be adequate. It should be, the amount should be considered, because we know that these NCDs that we are seeing, it is the amount people are over consuming that is causing the problems. So if you are eating the portions that the child is being given, the portions that they should get for their age, it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay. That's great. That's great. Please, if you have any other question, someone is asking whether the link for registration has been posted. It will be posted very soon. So please, you would have to fill that so that you can get your point from Allied Health. And I believe all of us have paid our 30 cedis, because it will be cross-checked. When you fill the form, it will be cross-checked with your registration. These monies have been very much subsidized so that you'll be able to meet the little cost we have to go incur to have these webinars. So please, if you haven't paid, do your best to pay so that we'll be able to meet our costs. But having said that, kindly make sure you register so that your name will be on the register that we'll send to the Allied Health for your point. If you have a question that you want to ask orally, kindly raise your hand. I will call you when I see it. So Cynthia is asking, the great presentation, Pearl. What feeds and milk are recommended for lactose intolerant babies after 6 months?
Okay, so for a baby who is with lactose intolerance, you can consider the plant-based milk. So milk like almond milk, coconut milk can be considered. Aside, well, it's not also only milk that's, it's a protein that should be in the child's food. So if you are trying the plant-based milk and it's not still working, you can look at the other protein options for the child. I'm dealing with a child like that right now who we are struggling with. We are trying the almond milk. Almond milk is also not very common. It's expensive. So you are looking at, even if she accepts it, the sustainability and the availability of this. So if you try the coconut or the almond milk or even soya milk and it doesn't work, then let's look at the other protein options that may be available for the baby, for the child.
All right. Thank you. Let me check whether we have somebody who wants to ask question orally. Okay. Maxwell. Maxwell, kindly unmute and ask your question.
All right. Thank you so much. Pearl, that was a very insightful presentation. So the question I wanted to ask is how the introduction of the complementary feed should be done. Because one of the things you realize is that most of the mothers exactly 6 months are in a hurry to feed fufu, banku, and all sort of solid foods.
Yeah.
Given the situation where the children are still learning, wouldn't it be more appropriate to at least start with the porridges? Because I remember sometime WHO brought some documents. I don't know what is still in practice, that at least the first 6 to 8 months should be basically fluid, and after 8 months or so, before you can introduce the banku, the fufu, and the other foods. So I want to know what's the current practice in terms of those recommendations. And then quickly, the last question is to our GAND executives regarding the current allied health guidelines that they are trying to implement. I know that we need to have some CPDs on leadership, ethics, and some other areas, but most of the CPDs we've done so far is more professional. And I was just looking at the outline, and I don't see any leadership or ethics CPD in there. So for some of us who have not had CPDs in those areas, what is the way forward for us? Is it that you still have plans? Because we're almost getting to the end of the year. So if you can get feedback on that, I think I will be grateful. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So, Pearl.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. Regarding the type of feed to start with, when starting the complementary feeding, it's ideal to start with the liquid foods. I have a personal experience with one of my boys. And when I started him on the complementary foods and we're giving him porridge, immediately you bring the porridge, this boy will start crying. He will cry, cry, cry. When you bring omutu, he will accept it. When you give him TZ, he will accept. But when you give him porridge, he's crying. And so I think because of our culture and what we eat, what we call our food, because whatever you are giving the child, apart from it's being nutritionally adequate, you're also looking at the culture. Okay, so it's ideal to start with the liquid foods. But if you start with the liquid food and the child wouldn't just accept it, you can try soft, very soft, semi-solid or solid foods in the same quantity that we have considered or we have mentioned, because we know that our local foods, they are very calorie loaded. When you see banku or fufu, small piece, so much calories. So even if you are going to start with that, then it has to be soft and the quantity also has to be considered.
Thank you so much. Alex Okra is asking, you said we should avoid spices and too much sodium. Now that you are saying that we shouldn't avoid flesh diet, which has been calling for more salt and spices, how is the child going to dodge the spices and the sodium that the child is to avoid?
Okay, very good question. So if, let's take, for example, you want to make chicken breast. You want to use chicken breast in the child's food. You can easily use some ginger, a little bit of ginger, some garlic, and some onions to steam it. And then you blend it into a paste. You don't need artificial spices on this to make it tender. All you need to do is to cut it into very tiny, tiny cubes. And they will boil, they will become soft within a very short time of boiling. You know, so let's gradually make our babies and our children get used to our local herbs and spices rather than the artificial ones, because it is all of this that's contributing to the NCDs that we find in adolescent stage and the adulthood life, because they become stuck with a particular taste, which becomes difficult to undo. Once somebody gets stuck with a particular taste, a particular way of cooking, it takes a long time for them to unlearn that I should change this or this should be taken out of my food. And that's what we usually battle with. Patients who come in with high blood pressure or hypertension or diabetes, they are stuck with a traditional spice that is increasing the blood pressure, but doesn't want to let go because so please, let's make the children become used to our indigenous local herbs and spices. They have even anti-inflammatory benefits, antibacterial and microbial benefits for them.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Pearl. So the spices should be natural spices, not the artificial one with monosodium and other ones. Thank you so much. Let me see. Okay, so before I go on to anyone who want to ask a question orally, I think I don't have any yet. Yeah, so Maxwell, if you look at the CPD announcement the GAND secretary puts out, well, you see that all the CPDs for the last quarter has been placed under the various categories. So if you look at what we are doing today, it still falls under category A. And that is the last CPD we are having under category A, which is under the professional. So we have 3 CPDs next week, next 2 weeks, next 3 weeks, that will be dealing with the ethics, the principle of autonomy, the principle of malfeasance, non-maleficence, and the principle of justice. That will be taken by 3 different professionals. So we want to take the opportunity to understand the GAND ethics well, so that we'll be ethical. right? Yes. So the three CPDs ahead of us all fall under category B. So I will encourage that all of us will be part of it so that we can get all the points under it. We have done it in such a way that if you didn't do any CPD anywhere and you only joined our first CPD on ethics and the second CPD on our AGM, then all the CPDs we are having, if you participate in all, you should be able to register under all the categories. Yes, so we all have I'll let the secretary will resend it. You'll see that all the CPDs under the various categories, and we encourage all of us to be part of all the CPDs that we have up to the 8th of December. Maxwell, I hope you are okay. If you have any subsequent question, we'll do it.
I do. I'm fine. Okay. Thank you.
All right. My pleasure. Okay. I think it's been an awesome time. It's been an awesome time, and myself, I've learned a lot, and I believe that I'll work better with my babies, infants, and toddlers as and when they are referred to us, and as we manage them in the various clinic and rehabilitation centers. I know that those who are joining us from Tema, if you are at work, you are rushing home because of the traditional ruler that we have lost, and as part of the customs, they are asking all of us to be indoors from 5 p.m. right? So I know those of us from Tema, if we don't close early, you leave us. Please don't leave. We'll close early so that all of us can go. Yeah. So for those of us from the north, middle belt, and the southern and central, we are burying a king in Tema. So the Tema people are mourning. So please mourn with us. Okay. I think there is no more question. So I'll give a few announcements. Please, I've posted the Google form in the chat box. Please do fill it with your AHPC PIN so that you'll be able to claim your 2 points, because it is the list we will send. And if you haven't paid your 30 cedis yet, you know that 30 cedis is very much subsidized. Please pay it. Please pay it so that your name will be on the list that we are filling to the Ally Health. Okay. Let me check for the last time if we have any more. Okay, so Cynthia is asking, when is it ideal to include processed sugar during complementary feeding?
Well, as much as possible. Like I said, you are teaching the child to accept a certain taste. So preferably, if you can start with the natural sugars from fruits. The good thing for us is when you are starting complementary feeding for a child, whatever you teach them is what they will learn. So if you start offering the porridge without sugar, that is what the child will know. If you start offering it with sugar in it, that's what their taste buds will adjust to. So I would say that if it is not a child who may be malnourished, whose energy intake you are trying to increase, then it may not be necessary to add white sugar to their food. You can just add some fruits. If you make the porridge, you can add some mashed banana into it. You can blend some apple and mix it. The good thing is, she doesn't know yet what sugar is and what the apple is. So you are now teaching the child. So use that as an opportunity to teach them what is nutritionally okay for them, what is healthier. Sugar has damaging effects even on their brain development. Excessive intake of white sugar. So I would say that if you are now going to introduce the child to something new, then introduce them to the healthy options than introducing them to something that you struggle to take away. The other option may be to use honey, but we encourage that honey should be added to their food after 2 years or even 2.5 before you start adding honey to their food.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yes. So Beatrice, I think for category C, we have 3 sessions. We'll be talking about the new AHPC guideline. What is it? I know many of us don't even understand the nuances of it, so we'll talk about it. We will talk about how we can meet the various aspects of the guidelines as professionals, and we have a leadership session with the president of GAND, who will talk to us about how we should have influence as nutrition leaders in our community and our places of work. So all of them have been categorized, and I think that if we follow through, we should be able to get all our CPD credits. Very soon, we will see a guideline coming to all of us requesting for the various CPD that you would want us to have. So please, when it comes, kindly put your various recommendations or your various suggestions there, and the CPD committee will look at it and put them for our next year CPDs. All right. God willing, next week, Wednesday, we have a category B session. So the GAND Code of Ethics, upholding the principle of autonomy. So this will be hosted by the Northern Sector or the Northern Zone, and our sister senior or our chief nutritionist, Mace and Senior Yechio, will be the speaker. So please, all of us should make it a point to attend. We are breaking down the GAND Code of Ethics so that we'll understand the various principles very well. Then we'll be able to live by them. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Please don't be in a hurry to leave. When we finish, we'd like to take some shots of those of us who attended before we leave. And also, we will ask all of us to unmute ourselves to be able to share some pleasantries before we leave. So don't leave yet. Don't leave yet. Let's take some pictures. After that, then we can go. The vice president is on. Mr. Percy Delali Agodo. Please, is there any announcement I've missed? You can give it so that before we take the pictures. Hello, Percy. Okay. All right. So I think we can have the pictures now. Please, can we have? Yes, I can see Ernestina there.
Hi.
Yeah, you're looking great.
Thank you.
Eliasu, you are looking great. I can see you. Yeah. So please, as many of us that can put on our pictures.
Yeah, Dr.
Our videos. Hey, Canada Nutrition Ghana, the exotic dietitian. I can see your hair. All right. Okay. So, please, Adi Genevieve Autry, can you please put on your video? Rose Adom, kindly put on your video so that we can take the pictures now. Yes, it's just a short time. We'll just take it, then we are done. Good. Sarah Labi, I can see you. All right. Okay. So please, I will say a very big thank you to Pearl. Pearl, you've done more than justice to the topic, and I've learned a lot. And I know many of us, when we see the reviews in the chat box, we are satisfied, and some are more satisfied, right? And you are looking great. It's been a while I saw you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So God richly bless you.
Thank you.
Please, you hear from the secretary when we are done. All the appropriate thanks and courtesies will be given. Those of us who gave the questions, please, we are so grateful to your contributions and help. Many people also give various contributions. We are grateful to you for making today's webinar a success. The recordings will be sent to us in due course by the secretary. So please be on standby for it. Okay. Will I have Ernestina, can you pray for us?
Okay. That's okay. We pray in the name of the Father, Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for making it very possible for us to meet once again to deliberate on issues that concern us and our fellow neighbors. We thank you for giving the strength to our presenter, Pearl, to be able to digest and make this topic very understandable to all of us. We pray at this point that each one of us will use this topic to be able to help someone else, at least in making sure that the growth and health, especially of children, is catered for. You will give us the strength to continue to do it. We also pray that as the subsequent CPDs are coming, we will be able to make time and come, and then together we learn to praise you. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Okay, now please you can unmute and say hi to your friends. You can see on the pages. Yeah, so I can see Sarah Labi, I can see Rosa Adom. Yes, you are looking great, Rosa. I can see Benis Edu. God bless you for joining. Pastor Stephen Naughty, RD. God bless you for joining. God bless you for joining. Then we have exotic dietitian. Why did you run away? I like your hair. Hey,
it's raining at my end, but I'll still say hello. So hello, everyone.
Hello. Who is that? Your name, please.
It's Sarah.
Hey, Sarah. Okay. All right. Then the rain is here to reach us in Tema here.
Yeah.
Hey,
Well, it's been a long time. How are you?
I'm fine.
Okay, great.
How did you? I've seen your face. And Maxi, Candy, how is it? Hey, Gary, your daughter looks great.
Nice baby.
And Isafo, God bless you for joining. Abina Setre, God bless you for joining. Paul Esiamwa, God bless you. Rejoice, God bless you. RD Genevieve, it's been a long time. Please, can you unmute for us to hear your voice more? Kojo Edu, God bless you. RD Lecha, God bless you. God bless you for joining. Thank you so much. We are grateful. Kate Kweki, thank you for joining. Pearl Bansa, God bless you. Francis Kansigri Wunguna. Hey, I hope I mentioned your name well. Forgive if I didn't mention it well. Yes, Evans, God bless you. Thank you for joining. Lauren Kujo, thank you for joining. And we have Ibrahim, Alice Ziaba, God bless you. Rhoda, thank you for joining. Hannah Isien, Zainab, Rejoice, and all of us. Thank you all for joining. Next week Wednesday, and have another great time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.